Kia ora and welcome to Sobriety Chat. I'm your host, Lotta Dann, otherwise known as Mrs. D. I am the community manager and content creator at Living Sober. And today I am joined by the legendary Jean McCarthy, an old friend of mine. Jean is a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and a mother in law. She's a sister, a daughter, a property manager, a painter, a podcaster, a writer, and she is sober. Welcome, Jean.
Thanks for having me. It's so nice to be here.
Oh, it's great to see you. And it's great to have you on this chat because we've connected a number of times over the years, but never in this format face to face. So I'm really happy to be talking to you today.
Yeah, I love that technology lets us do this.
I know, right? Gosh, I mean, because you feel like a friend, and we live on other sides of the world, and we've never shared a cup of tea, but we might as
I
well have.
know. But we've been connected weirdly since like day one almost. Um,
Yeah,
when it was we were both anonymous podcasters, so we didn't know who each
yeah,
other were. I'm not even sure if I said where I was in the world. I might have said I was Canadian at first.
yeah.
And
I'm not
then
sure,
we
did
kind
I?
of started, I think we shed our anonymity close to the same time. Like, did we post our pictures on the same day even? I feel
Maybe. But I
one of us
remember
went
your
first and then,
blog was one of the first that I came across, and you seemed so wise and kind of ahead of me. But how long is it? I mean, how far ahead are you ahead of me with your sobriety? How long since you've last had a drink, Jean?
March, March 20th, 2011.
Oh, okay. So it's only like 6 months ahead of me.
Yeah. Okay. So, see, you started blogging. Did you start right on your first day? Did you start blogging on your first
Yeah,
day? That's what I
I
did.
did.
Hmm.
Yeah, the second day,
So,
actually, I think. The first day I quit, I wrote a letter to myself on a piece of paper. And then the second day, I was like, bugger this, I typed fast and just went online. And so it began. But anyway, for people who don't know your story, can you just share a little bit, like, why did you quit? What was your relationship like with alcohol?
it was like the solution that became a problem. So I would say in my 30s, I was doing the busy mom thing, busy working mom. And um, I think as a people pleaser, always took on too much and really was kind of addicted to accomplishments and achievements. And so I was always doing that kind of hustling for our worthiness thing, as to use a Brene Brown term. Um, and so I had a lot of self-esteem issues, but really what I started doing was having a glass of wine to fall asleep at night because my biggest fear was not sleeping and then being too tired to get up and run the world again the next day. And so that worked quite well at first. A nice big glass of wine put me to sleep quite reliably. And then, you know what happened. Listeners know what happened. Over the course of a decade, one glass of wine before bed became, a bottle of wine after work and a little tequila and whatever I could get in without people really noticing. And my husband didn't realize I was struggling. He knew I drank, but I think he thought I drank like he did, which was take it or leave it, a glass of wine with dinner, that kind of thing. He didn't, I was hiding how much I was drinking. And I knew it was too much. And the thing that scared me was every time I tried to stop, I kept not only not being able to stop, but it continued to become more. So it was like, going on a diet to lose 5 pounds and gaining 20, it was like one step forward, not one step forward, 3 steps back. It was like that. So that became really quite scary. And I started to think, I'm not going to be able to hide this much longer. And that scared me because I was very judgmental of anyone who I saw who was visibly showing a drinking problem. So heaven forbid someone judged me the way I judged others. And also, the way I judged myself. I was just so shame driven. And yeah, it was just a really sad, desperate time. And all I really did was I would get up every day, Lotta, and think today's going to be the day. I'm not going to drink today. And then by noon, there would be a reason why, oh, I can't not drink today. Something good happened, something bad happened, something scheduled. I've got company, I've got an event to go to. There's no way I can't not drink. But really what it was by noon, I was starting to go through withdrawal. I can see that now looking back, that cycle of daily drinking. So I had set up my life so that I could get home from work and basically just get quietly pickled until bedtime. And my whole plan, really the beautiful, perfect plan was to pass out a second before my head hit the pillow. Because the thing I dreaded most, this makes me emotional remembering it, was to lay awake in bed. And because I could distract myself with busyness all day, I could stay too busy to confront myself or to be alone with my thoughts all day. But when I went into bed at night and I laid my head on the pillow, that's when the voices would start, the self-doubt, the ruminating on what happened that day, all of the things I was kind of trying to outrun, I think. All that inner turmoil would confront me. And so instead of, having a glass of wine to help me fall asleep, by the time I was in my early 40s, I was really trying to just time a blackout to bedtime and still get my laundry done and still get lunches made the next day and still do all the things, right? I was working full time. My kids were teenagers. There was lots on the go. And that's just what it felt like. So every day I wanted to quit and every day I didn't. And I was so afraid of what's my rock bottom going to be, because what I knew a little about addiction and recovery. I knew that once you became an alcoholic, you could never drink again. And so I was becoming aware that I didn't like the word alcoholic. I didn't want to be an alcoholic because that had a shame label that I didn't want. But I was accepting that I was really wanting to quit and never to drink again. I really wanted to be free of this burden.
You were accepting of that. Wasn't that terrifying, that thought of no alcohol ever again?
In a way, it was terrifying and thrilling, the idea that I could not care about alcohol, the idea that I could have all that time back and that I could be strong and that I could be free of some of this shame was thrilling in the morning and terrifying in the afternoon. Impossible.
And I mean, and we know now that is possible because we're living proof of it. We both, 10, 11 years on, we are free, but the transition is so hard. So what was that like, getting to that place of comfort with the no alcohol once you'd made that final decision?
Yeah.
How hard was that transition phase? Because that's what
there?
most of our members are in, that really hard phase of all the emotion and all the cravings and all the thinking people are judging you. And I mean, there's so much to contend with, right?
Yeah. And I think that, so the challenge I had was that I was waiting for some rock bottom, because my thought was, I'll have some rock bottom that will make it essential for me to quit. That's how I understood. Something bad happens and then you have to quit, But I didn't want to have a car accident. I didn't want to have a DUI. I didn't want to hurt anybody. I didn't want my kids to feel the shame for me that I was feeling for myself. So I was worried that what is going to happen that's going to bring this to a head? And how am I going to live with the shame that comes with it? And my whole world is going to come crumbling down because I built up all this superwoman BS because I'm so externally identified and driven, but never internally fulfilled. So I felt like I had on this suit of armor. So I had this epiphany of I could just quit. I could stop fearing this rock bottom and I could just quit. And
do you remember where that came and where?
Yeah, I do. It was really powerful. I feel like, it was kind of like an external awareness. I was actually at an event, at a dinner, a posh dinner, a ladies' awards night, and I was hosting because I was running a home building company at that time. So I had a lot of business associates at the table, a lot of women who I was, wanting to inspire and, bring into this volunteer role and stuff. So I was at a table full of women. There was wine on the table. And there was a motivational speaker. Sometimes at those fancy dinners, they have a speaker who gives a talk on something. And this talk happened to be on some kind of leadership or something. And so she was guiding the audience through a little bit of a visualization. And she had said to the audience, I want all of you to close your eyes and think of a goal that you have for yourself. And I was 43, I think, at the time. And I thought, well, I know that for my 50th birthday, I want to hike Machu Picchu. Like that was my dream. Haven't done it yet, and I'm 55. But at that time, that was like my goal. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna close my eyes and think about Machu Picchu. So I closed my eyes, and Lotta, I felt like a hand came down from the ceiling and just smacked me on the chest. And I heard the words, I need to quit drinking. And I feel it in my body still.
I've not heard this story before.
So I gasped. And the first thing I did was I opened my eyes and looked around because I was so afraid that I had shouted it out. I was so afraid that the voice I'd heard, which was my voice, in my head, I was afraid I'd maybe said it or everyone had heard it somehow. So I open my eyes, I look around the table in absolute terror. And because everything's a big deal, when you're juggling addiction.
Yeah.
And it's all about me. But everyone had their eyes closed and their head down. So I'm like, okay, nobody heard that. Machu Picchu. So I close my eyes again to try to think about Machu Picchu. And I hear it again. I need to quit drinking. And the feeling I describe this way, if I said to you, picture a puppy wandering onto the freeway, how you would go, you would gasp and jump and try to save that puppy from the oncoming traffic. I had that feeling for myself. I was like, I've got to save myself. And I can still feel it in my body when I take a big breath like that, when I go, it's suspended right there. And so I felt that, not just anxiety, but it was all of the little pings and paper cuts and trials and errors and everything. It just exploded in that moment. So maybe it was God hitting me, if you want to see it that way. Maybe it was my consciousness awakening. I have no way to, I don't try to ascribe it to anything. All I can tell you is how it felt for me in that moment. And that I thought, this is it. This is my chance to change my life. I'm going to do this thing that I've never been able to do. I'd been trying and failing every day for years. And I'm like, this is it. And so, but what did I do? I kept drinking that night because I was already drinking. So here's the alcoholic thinking. You have this life-changing epiphany awareness, but my muscle memory was to try to numb it. It was the only response I had to any emotion, was to drink at it.
Yeah.
So it was so overwhelming. Well, not only that, I wanted to run out of the room and start my life, but I was in Jean mode. I was in my fake identity, in my armor, and I had to keep up my game face for the rest of the night. So I continued to drink wine at dinner, but not too much because I knew I had to drive home. So I never drank very much when I was out. It was always when I got home. But all through that drive home, I kept thinking, is it still there? Yeah, I can still feel it. It's still there. It's still there. And it was like a bruise that I kept touching, is it still there? Is it still there? So I went home and I drank that night. And the next day I kept checking. It was still there. It was still there. But I was really scared. So I didn't buy alcohol the next day, but I did kind of the ill-advised, and I just drank whatever I could find in the house, which happened to be a bottle of red wine that had been open and sitting in the cupboard for a while, so it probably was pretty not fresh. So I drank that. I had a horrible hangover the next day because I didn't usually drink red wine. And I woke up and I went for a walk with a friend. And I just couldn't contain it anymore, Lotta. I said to her, I have to tell you something. I'm going to quit drinking. And she's like, why? Because she didn't know I had a problem. And I said, I drink every day and I can't stop. I drink from the time I get home from work, and I leave work early, usually, so I can go home and drink. And then till I go to bed at night. Like, I drink for 8 hours a day, 4 p.m. till midnight, at least. And when I'm not drinking, all I think about is drinking or trying not to drink or whatever. And I've been trying to quit and I can't. And I think I'm ready. And I had never told anybody. Like, I'd done that thing where you're drinking with friends and you say, I'm drinking too much, I need to stop. And who do you say it to? You say it to the people who you know are going to tell you,
You're
fine.
okay.
If you're an alcoholic, I'm an alcoholic. And then I think,
Yeah.
well, I don't want them to feel bad.
So how did you go with your thoughts in bed at night after the alcohol went away? Because that's the bit that you were scared of. And you talk about, the only reaction that you had for any emotion was to numb it, and, ditto. And it's, when you're not numbing, it's raw and it's hard and it's scary and it's uncomfortable. So how did you go in those early weeks and months?
Well, I found, I guess, I think I didn't realize what I was doing, but looking back, here's what I think I did. I had some excitement, first of all. So that was a bit of a distraction initially.
Yeah.
And I started the blog. So then
Yeah.
I was busy learning. This 2011. Nobody blogs anymore. Maybe you would start an Instagram account, but I was putting all that creative energy into this anonymous online account because I this is embarrassing to tell you this now, but I mean, I kind of look back on how ego driven I was, or that's a term that you hear in recovery a lot, right? The ego. But I had this false image of myself, and because I didn't think my authentic self was worth anything. So I thought, people are going to be really fascinated with this story of how this businesswoman who could just do all the things got sober quietly. I mean, because most people are just a hot mess, but I'm special. I'm different. I'm doing well. So I thought, I'll write this blog and I'll account what this is like. And then maybe I'll write an article for a magazine or something. And I do it anonymously, I assumed, but I thought people are going to be really interested in this very unusual thing. This person who quit before hitting rock bottom and who was able to do all these things while struggling with alcohol. So I started blogging about it because I thought I was like so special. And
I love your honesty.
That's healing. That's my healing talking, because
Yeah.
I really couldn't have laughed at myself at the time. I took it very seriously, but I learned very quickly, because at that time blogs were quite an engaged place where people would write their story, but also comment a lot on each other's. That doesn't happen so much anymore. That's moved to other platforms, but that's how it worked at the time. So God bless the people that kindly commented on my blog and said, first of all, gave me some good advice, but also said, you're not alone. I'm sober and I'm reading your blog, and thanks for sharing. And I'm sober with you today. I'm not drinking along with you today. And that was, oh my gosh. I mean, that just felt so good, because
And that was new because it was you connecting with others. It wasn't like I'm
Yeah.
on this track and I'm the solo traveler doing this stuff. Suddenly that's softening. And did that help your authentic person come out?
Yeah. So I was getting, now we know that there's all this dopamine that happens from online engagement when you put something up and then you receive positive feedback. So that was, giving me some of my my pleasure reward circuitry was completely fried. So to have some new inputs into that, I mean, I'm speaking, very much as a layman.
Yeah.
I don't know what the proper neurological terms would be for it, but I just, to get some other positive inputs. So I love being creative. So writing the blog and just setting it up, and the
Oh, I
idea
can
of
relate.
right, like picking the name, and then
Yes.
um learning something new, putting my energy towards something besides drinking,
Yeah.
and then making connections. So we know the power of connection in recovery. So to connect with other people, because
Yeah.
I didn't tell my husband that I quit drinking.
Yeah, that was the
I didn't
game
tell anybody.
changer, eh? It was
Yeah.
on so many levels. It was the expressing what you were feeling, getting all the messy thoughts out of here and
Yeah.
onto the page,
Yeah.
then getting the response from people. I mean, I
Yeah.
still do it to this day with the Living
Yeah.
Sober site because it does keep me sober, and
It's
it
so
I,
helpful.
it's okay that we can say it does give us that reward feeling, that dopamine, that kind of feedback and that sense of achievement, because that we are human and we need that stuff, but it's in a place that's so much more healthy.
Sure. And I think the difference, Lotta, is that I was getting it for being authentic. I was getting it for
Yeah,
telling the truth instead of doing what I thought other people wanted me to do, or doing what I thought would get me a gold star.
yeah,
And not that I was completely fake in my real life at the time, but I think because I was so unwell by being so preoccupied with alcohol, that everything felt hollow, because I knew I was hiding something big. And so I did experience the joy of freedom. And then I think the other thing we were doing at that phase, I'll speak for you as well, and for every other person who started to develop this online blogging, is that I was developing a new identity and new connections. And then a few days into this, I was also starting to have some realizations that, I'm not special. So I had a little, like, a momentary of like, do I still want to do this? Not special.
yes,
Not get sober, but I mean, write about it. Like,
yeah,
have I, should I just delete this? Because have I embarrassed myself? Have I tipped my hand that I thought a little wrong about myself there? But all of those other good things were coming in, and I thought, no, I like this. This feels really good,
yeah,
and it's interesting, and it's helpful. And
yeah.
then after a few days, here's the thing that blew my mind. Somebody commented and said, I'm on day 1 and you're helping me. And in my self-centeredness at the time, I really didn't realize that I had kind of thought I was the last person that was ever going to quit drinking, you know? Like, it never occurred to me that other people would come
Right.
behind, and that I would be inspiring to them. That was a shock. I was just so focused on what I needed and where was I going to get that help, or how was I going to do this for myself, that it was like it was just a shock to realize, oh my gosh, like, I'm inspiring somebody. Like,
Mm.
that wasn't my purpose at all. Um,
Yeah, I know. The way that I process that is because people do look up to us because we've put ourselves forward and we do the books and blogs and all the rest of it. But the way I process it is I'm not special. A lot of people get sober, a lot of people go through recovery, and everyone who is in a good recovery gives back to the world. I just happen to have a skill set that puts me in this place. I can
yeah,
write, I can communicate, and I can just put myself out there. That's why I'm doing this. It doesn't make me on a platform in terms of recovery. I just am using the skills I have to do what I do. Same with you. You've got
yeah,
these skills of communicating, um, making things happen, pulling things together. That's why you're where you are. But again, we're just like everyone else. Some people go off and do amazing work as teachers or artists or I don't know what, electricians, whatever,
yeah, yeah.
Everyone who's sober does great things with their skill set, but we just have these skill sets. But look, just want to move to, what you've been doing because
Because
we
you don't
went
want to
on.
do a 4-hour interview.
I could, but sadly, no. You went on to then hosts the Bubble Hour, which is an incredible podcast, and I really highly recommend it. Was if people haven't heard it, I'll put the link in this post, but it's just really powerful sharing and connecting and normalizing and just this generosity and vulnerability and openness and the Bubble Hour, and there's so much there to listen to. But Jean, you've now been through, re-listened to all of it, and done this wonderful final series, right, of sort of wrap up highlights. I mean, I cannot imagine the hours of work you've put into this, and then pulled little bits out and created a new blog series called Tiny Bubbles.
Podcast,
Can you
a podcast
a
series.
new
Yeah.
podcast? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, how have you
How?
done this, and what's it been like?
So, I knew last year I realized, so I had the Bubble Hour was started by other people. I came on as a co-host, through the online community. I had some background in doing that kind of thing, not podcasting, but media and TV through my job as a home builder. So I thought, oh, I have this platform, maybe I could fill in for them. And then I ended up as a co-host in 2013. And a couple of years later, when everyone got too busy and the show was kind of fizzling out. And then I asked, would it be okay if I took this on by myself? Because I was going through quite a transition. All my kids had moved out by that time. We had just closed. Our home building company was going through a big transition because we decided to retire early, or the market decided for us that we were going to retire early from home building. So I went from having this really big job to working from home. And I thought, if I could just do the podcast by myself and just schedule one-on-one interviews, I could actually keep this going. The hard part was scheduling for co-hosts and guests and all of that. So that's when I took it on myself, and I just happened to have the time to do it. And I was going through a transition where I kind of needed something to do. And so I just always trusted. I worked really hard to keep my ego in check. I wanted to make sure that Bubble Hour was not the Jean show, that I stayed really connected to that beautiful way that you just expressed giving service as someone who recovers out loud, was that the show is the show. Anybody could step in and hold space for others and do a good job. I happen to be the one who's here doing it. So I'm going to be a good steward of this show and do a good job for as long as it's an appropriate fit for me and it's good for the show. But I need to listen to everything that's telling me when it's time to be done. And I can't hang on to this show just for my own ego, So I really had to make sure that I wasn't building my identity, attaching my identity to the success or lack of success of that show, that I just saw my role as kind of a service role. And that really helped me because I would check in with myself a couple times a year and realize, nope, the show's like, it's ticking along, feels good, it's going good. But at one point I did that check-in with myself and I just felt like, nope, it's time to be done. It's time to be done. And I had a couple of kind of milestones happen that year. So the Bubble Hour hit 4 million downloads. So yeah, amazing. And it is ranked as in the top 0.5 percentile of podcasts worldwide. Wow. So that's just, that is says something about the recovery community, because I did nothing to promote it. I took no advertising, no sponsorship, it just grew organically from people needing that resource. And for a long time, you and I and a few other voices, we were it. There wasn't a lot else out there. So that show really grew. But when it hit 4 million, I thought, oh, that's quite a nice round number. And I just hit, I think, 300 or 350 episodes. And that was a nice round number. And it was in the top 0.5%. And I thought, oh, that's a nice round number. And I was, on the verge of season 10. And I thought, those all felt like kind of signposts. And I wanted to end the show while it was good. I didn't want to just kind of run out of energy and have it just stop one day. I
Mm.
really wanted to wrap it up with a bow.
Oh, it's so
So
good.
yeah, so I didn't
I
take
just
any
love
more
it.
guests, and I took a big long break. And as you said, it was an enormous amount of work to go through the back catalog. But I knew, like, I took some time to figure out, like, how do I end this appropriately? Do I bring back everybody for some kind of like big mass interview? What do I do? And I took, oh gosh, almost a year, I think I took just thinking about it. And I was so tired of doing it that I needed a break.
Mm.
And over that time, then this came to me of creating a beautiful like audio documentary out of all of the old archives.
Mm.
And slowly over the time of doing the podcast, I had developed the, really basic skill set to be able to do that, just using GarageBand and a few transcription programs. And so that took me quite a long time. That took me out, I think, 6 months or more to build the 10 episodes for the final season.
It's
And
like a best of, isn't it? It's just a great edit of all the best of bits.
yeah, it really is. And it was hard to choose because there was so many. Of course, you're in there because that was so special all the times. I think you were on the show 3 or 4 times.
3 or 4, yeah, I think
And
so.
it was always like a massive technical like migraine trying to coordinate getting you internationally to connect through the archaic Flintstones era phone system that we were using. Anyway, so I built that, and then I thought, well, okay, I took 350 hours, boiled them down to 10, but there's still all of this great content that exists. And so I created a book. So some of those like great little bits I put into this beautiful book called Take
Which
Good
just
Care.
arrived for me yesterday. It is the
It's
most
so
gorgeous.
pretty.
I feel like I wanna give it to someone who's new in recovery, but I actually don't. I wanna keep it for myself because the way you've structured it and, forgive me for talking for you, but you've got these sort of short little chapters which are thoughts, but then you're inviting people to go over it more than once so that
Yeah,
you can read once and process, and then you can go back to it because we were just talking about this before we recorded. Things land differently at different
yeah,
times in your process and in
yeah.
life, I know, but especially with recovery, you might watch or read something early on and you're like, oh yeah, that was cool, and then it comes to you again at a different time and it lands like a thud. So I love that. Is just so clever, Jean. How did you come to
Oh,
that?
good. Well, years ago, I had seen some kind of like a daily devotional or something that when I was in my like really churchy days, for a while there I was really churchy. I tried that on. I've been addicted to multiple things over the years. I was addicted to religion for a while there, and no disrespect to anyone who's like authentically engaged in religious practice. It just for me it
Yeah.
wasn't so much about authenticity. But anyway, there was this devotional that had these little 3 boxes at the top, and you could read it in any order. But she said, tick off a box when you read each page, and then you're done the book when you've read each page 3 times. So that process I thought was really brilliant. And I knew for myself, I would interview someone and have one experience as I interviewed them. When I edited it after, I might hear something I hadn't heard before. And then if I re-listened, a year later, it would land differently again. And I have always thought it's interesting to kind of measure our change. And because we've been writing about our recovery since the beginning, we've naturally done that.
Mm.
But I know that when I've interviewed people and I've kind of given them like a bullet point of, as you prepare to tell me your story on the bubble hour about your addiction and recovery, here's a few things I want you to try to address in your presentation. So spend some time going over this. And I was surprised by how many people found that exercise really fulfilling because they had never quantified their journey in that way.
Mm.
And as writers, we kind of naturally do that, but writers or not, everyone seemed to enjoy that process. And then I thought about people like you who had like written letters to yourself over the years or had, things that you kept in a drawer. And I thought, it's nice to have these kind of keepsakes of our growth. So with that book, I took like a beautiful idea or nugget or like bit of wisdom that I had learned from hosting the Bubble Hour and wrote about, a little reflection on that lesson. And then I ask a
Yeah.
question at the end of it. And then I give the reader space to answer the question and invite them
Yeah.
to come back again and again and
Yeah.
answer the same question and see how it changes. I'd have to say, it's fair to know that sometimes something that is really moving to us, down the road we read it and we're like, I don't know, that doesn't hit me.
Yeah.
And that's actually a great thing. So, because
Yeah.
that means you've learned that lesson, you've
Yeah.
incorporated it. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not earth shattering anymore. It's everyday to you. So that's
Yeah.
even something to record. The times where we're like, I don't know, this doesn't
Mm.
rock my world right now. I must
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
That's nice to see too.
So we started this interview with you talking about, that you'd had this sort of superwoman, got to do everything all the time. And, to be honest, you're still amazingly productive. You've got this creative flow and urge, and obviously really driven and like being busy, and that's all okay. Is the difference now, and I've heard you say this word, and it's one of my favorite words, is the difference now that it's authentic, nourishing work rather
Yeah.
than some kind of everyone think I'm great and clever. You don't care so much about that anymore, and it's just about fulfilling
Yeah.
stuff.
That's exactly it. My recovery, sobriety, quitting drinking, quitting whatever, knitting, whatever you're addicted to, creates room for recovery. And that's where we heal what was underneath whatever we, were masking with these coping skills that became addictive or maladaptive. So my recovery has really been, I've recovered authenticity. And it's an ongoing job for me. But one of the great things about getting older is that you get a little time back. So my children grew and left home, so I'm not looking after them. So I have a little more time in my day. And our business, it seemed like a disaster to close down this big home building company, years ago, but it's turned out to be great because now we have some properties that we manage, but it's more part-time. So I have all this time to be creative or to do other things. But instead of doing the things that, like, what do people seem to want me to do that's going to make me feel important or valued, I really try to do what feels right to me. And I had this beautiful idea last year that I was very frustrated by not having as much time as I wanted to do all the creative things that I do. You might be able to see far in the background, there's some paintings kind of leaning on the table there. I've started painting during the pandemic, and I wanted more time to paint. And I just felt like I couldn't be as creative as I wanted. And then I realized I don't have to stop my life to be creative. I can weave my creativity through everything I do. And I also need to acknowledge my creativity every time I do it. So I'm a person who disappears when I take my makeup off. I have pale features, pale skin. And so I wear makeup every day. And I've started to realize that that is a beautiful half hour of creativity that I give myself every day. I curl my hair. That's like a beautiful,
Mhm.
nurturing creativity. We have a property in the woods, and normally we're always like pulling weeds and clearing fallen trees. And I thought, what if I cut paths through the woods and made all of these wonderful little surprises for the grandkids when they come? Or what if I just made a path for myself to walk through and had all of these delightful little twists and turns and vignettes? And so I started, making beading hangings and hanging them off the trees and gathering driftwood and building these little driftwood villages um, and hiding those in the forest and cutting this path. And I realized, like, I'm I just get so much joy out of weaving these little things throughout my day. But now it's kind of become like the backdrop of our lives.
Mm,
And I just feel so joyful about that. So,
you
these
are a
books that I'm
gift.
writing are part of that too.
I am so, so, so happy that you got sober. I just feel like that image of that woman who's drinking to blackout every night so she doesn't have to hear her own thoughts, to this woman now who's beading things to hang in the forest and cutting trees and recognizing that the half hour of makeup is meaningful. Like all of that stuff is so subtle and powerful at the same time, and it's just amazing. And I just think you're amazing. I love you.
Oh, I love you
Now,
too, and I'm
I want
grateful.
to I want to close. This is another one of your books, The Ember Ever There, and it's a beautiful little book of poetry, poems on change, grief, growth, recovery, and rediscovery. Because people watching, if you had any doubts that Jean was someone who produces and is busy and achieves and gives to us, this is another gift. And there's a poem in here that I often use. I have this sitting, this is my room where I do all my podcasts, all my webinars. I have a job doing webinars on addiction, and we open and close with karakia, which is a Maori sort of proverb or poem. And sometimes I close with this poem of yours because I just think it is so beautiful. And is it okay if I do it today at the end of
Oh,
our sobriety chat?
yes, thank
It's
you.
very short, but it's just beautiful. It's called Sunrise. And just like that, when hope felt lost, the sunrise lit the mountain top, insisting we all look up. Thank you, my friend. You are so great, and I've loved chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on. Keep up the good work. I'm going to
No.
put links to all your work everywhere so people can click and find you if they don't know you already. You're in for a treat. There's a lot to listen to.
And hi, and thanks to all your listeners. And if you're doing this sober thing, keep doing it. It is worth it. Recover your authentic self. You're going to love who that person is. And I think, Lotta, I speak for both of us when I say, like, it's an honor that we get to, be tools in someone's toolbox, and that we get to walk this road with so many people. It is a really beautiful life. It really is. So keep going. You're not
That's
alone.
a mic drop. Okay. See you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.